So good, so good, so good.
Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Filmmakers Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk filmmaking, from indie film to studio films and everything in between. How to get them made, how to make them, and how to try not to royally F it up, in our very, very humble opinion. I'm Giles Alderson. I'm a writer, director and producer, and I'm currently in Bulgaria filming something really, really fun. More about that later. But today, I'm very excited because our guest today is a filmmaker whose work constantly delves into the, shall we say, intricate tapestry of human experience. And he does it with remarkable sensitivity and depth. It is the director, John Crowley. Dom Lenoir sat down with him a little while ago and talked all about his latest film, We Live in Time. The film stars Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh and is electric and wonderful and incredible. If you haven't seen it yet, do seek it out. A little bit about John Crowley then. If you don't know, now you do. He burst onto the scene with this critically acclaimed feature debut, Intermission, and that was followed by his powerful and poignant Boy A. And then he captivated us with the moving Brooklyn, starring Saoirse Ronan, which earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. He then took on the complex, I would say, literary adaptation of The Goldfinch, and also his television work has included the acclaimed series of True Detective and Black Mirror. So, We Live in Time. It is a compelling addition to his already pretty much impressive filmography. This is a romantic drama, which was written by Nick Payne, and it really explores the relationship of the couple, played by Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh, as I have said, over the course of a decade. We Live in Time employs a non-linear narrative, weaving through snapshots of their lives together, falling in love, building a home, becoming a family, and it confronts a difficult truth that challenges their very foundation. Dom Lenoir sat down with John Crowley and unpacked his creative journey, not only as a screenwriter and director, but behind We Live in Time, this poignant film, and explores the themes that drives his artistic vision. So, without further ado, because I'm kind of busy, please give a huge warm welcome in your own heads, wherever you are, whether you're on a bus, in the bath, just chilling. Do it in your head now. Give a warm welcome. Clap wonderfully to the brilliant, incredibly talented director, John Crowley.
Hi, John. How are you doing?
Hello, Dom. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Just got back from Lapland, so that was exciting.
From Lapland? Wow, gosh.
So, massive congratulations on the film. I mean, it's the kind of film I love seeing. I love these kind of dramas and meaningful stories, and you did an excellent job. And I love the use of the different timelines and all that. How is it sort of the reception for you and that whole process of the release?
Gosh, I'm slightly overwhelmed by the reaction of certain people who watch it, if I'm honest. I mean, it hits part of our audience very hard, and those people often make their feelings known to you after screening, and it's they have an intense reaction to it, which is overwhelming. So I'm delighted that people are finding it funny and moving and relatable, which is really what I wanted it to carry out into the world. But you never know what audience is going to take from something or enjoy about it.
I always think that's the greatest gift, is to be able to move an audience and to go into a cinema and really feel something and think about something else at the end of it, and having gone through that sort of cathartic experience. And it's rare to get one that does really sort of move you like this. And it does right from the music sort of kicking in. You can sort of tell it's going to be something that lingers with you long after watching.
Good.
So let's talk about how it all began. I know from sort of past conversations you'd been discussing with the screenwriter, collaborating on something for some time. But how did the story sort of come to you? What was your initial impressions and your first leanings towards the project?
Yeah, like you said, I knew Nick Payne. I directed a play by him at the Donmar Warehouse, and we had discussed a few other things. So the first I heard of this script was a text from him saying, "You're going to get a script tomorrow," from Sonny March, who he had taken a commission from, as it were, I think for a different script. And then he ran out of energy on that script, or he felt, I can't write this anymore. I've got this original idea. Can I write that instead? And I said, okay, off you go. Do what you want. And he sent in his draft on that, and it was the first draft of this, We Live in Time. So from that point, I read it, right? And then from there, it was a year before the script was sort of in good enough shape to send to actors. So, and at that point, yeah, we got our stuff together and sent it to Andrew.
So what was your first kind of impressions? Okay, here's a script. I like the basic storyline. I'm a director. Like, how would I like this to change from a story point of view, from my own sort of take on things as a vision?
I think the thing that there's two impressions I have of the first reading. One is I was profoundly moved, especially by the birth scene. Right, I found myself laughing out loud with tears in my eyes, and kind of going, "Damn you!" It sort of got me. Okay, as a reader, in a way that made me know, okay, it's got the elements that I can work with and that I'm comfortable working with. Up to that point, I was a little resistant of the idea of making a film about cancer. I just thought, is it going to be too sad? Is it? Are you only putting an audience in a difficult spot of simply leaving them in a sort of great big bath of emotion and waving at them, going, "There you go, feel sad, that's it, life, bye"? Is there a way in which you can meaningfully and truthfully toggle between this sort of absurdity and playfulness that often accompanies those sadder scenes, and realize that would be a tone that could be very rich to strike. So that was my sort of mangled thinking about it. And he of course had written two wonderful characters, because he's a brilliant character writer. And so it felt like there was an opportunity to find a way of realizing those two roles with two great English film stars as well, right? And that maybe we could make a film which was contemporary and relatable, genuinely relatable, as in a lot of people might look at it and go, that feels like life. But it's got enough playful cinematic juice in it, both in terms of the romance and in terms of the sadness and heartbreak of it, and in terms of the playful structure that made it feel like it had a degree of scale to it, and that, regardless of whether we would pull this off or not, that this sort of big game hunting of the script, as it were, right, what it was wanting to sort of get at was to try and find the epic in the everyday. But by which I mean, like, for the vast majority of people, divorce, falling in love, having kids or choosing not to have kids, juggling work-life balance, it's this stuff of every day, and it ain't all that poetic. It's just daily reality. And to try and make a film that would be relatable and yet allow people to sort of laugh and cry at that in a way was the task, and to acknowledge that oftentimes in people's own private lives, those events are often the most profound things that happen to them. and people might not be interested in other people's versions of those. People not be interested in other people's kids. But to a parent, that kid is sort of everything, and the way in which it came into the world might be the very limit of all that that person feels in life, And in a way, that's what the film is kind of trying to do, and is aspiring to do in that birth scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you mentioned quite a few things that I found really interesting there. I mean, first of all, we're sort of filmmakers on the podcast, and we love that kind of heightened drama sense, because it does allow you to feel it allows you to access things that are everyday, but in a way that isn't mundane and it isn't boring. And I think the way that you flip between the comedy and the hopeful elements, especially, it gives a sort of grounding, but also reality that allows you to feel the sadness, because sometimes in these sort of terminal illness dramas, you can have a curve that goes slowly downwards, and you're just watching just someone decline. And it's sad, but you switch off from it, because it doesn't sort of cover the humanity of it all. And I think the timeline sort of side of this especially manages to encapsulate those big themes and that sort of contrast very well.
But it's a sort of open invitation to an audience, that there's a sort of playful sort of, come on, play with us and tease this together yourself. Come on, piece it together. That it allows you to make an audience not just second guess what's going to happen, because in a way you're saying, look, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. Even if you can feel it's not going to end well, how we're going to get to the not ending well is not going to be the way you think it's going to be. It's not going to be an inevitable decline. And you're right. I think that people feel with illness films oftentimes that it sort of has the wrong kind of inevitability about it. And this is not after that anyway. It's not really wanting to say this is what a person looks like in decline. It's more, this is what happens when you've got two people who are full of life and they have to confront a lack of time together. This is what it looks like. This is how complicated it is. This is how messy it is. This is how lonely it is, that they both sort of walk the road separately, but find a way back to each other at the end. And this is how absurd it is when you try and have a conversation with a child about this. There's a clown in the restaurant. Or, it's sort of it's looking at those different elements, right, and saying, look at this. These are different facets of this situation, rather than just going, and here she is, declining. I think the one scene which acknowledges the sort of decline element, but in the way in which we did it, of course, it's very different, is the head shaving.
Yes,
right? Which is
that's right. Yeah,
the only place that one would usually really do that is contextually very specific. The implications of it are devastating, of course, right? But the way in which it's done and the playfulness with which it's done is the point. And then you are allowed to observe these three people dealing with this thing and going through it in their own very specific way. And the humor allows you to get close to the heart of darkness without being overwhelmed or just, like I say, dropped in a big bath of sadness and left there.
Yeah, certainly. And it does, in a way, it does actually have all the sort of hallmarks. It's a very well structured film as a sort of end result, in that it does kind of start you off with some hopeful sort of elements. It goes through the middle, and then the scene with the hair shaving and the sort of emotional finale sort of happens somewhere towards the end. I mean, what were your initial thoughts from a structure point of view when you were reading it? I mean, in Eternal Sunshine, they have different coloured hair for the different coloured sort of timelines. What was your thoughts? I mean, you're obviously not trying to overdo it by the sounds of it.
I think I had two things in my head when I read it. First was the first draft I read was much longer, and it had a lot more beats, and it had more endings, and it was sort of a little bit more complicated in a way it was a little bit, the less was a lot more, to put it that way, that actually, and I think the second thing was, gosh, this is hard, right? Because, and indeed it was, as I was having to prep it and then, and pitch it to
Mm.
We had one set of financiers, but there was foreign distribution companies. There was lots of people who were interested in it and would all point out, this is tough because how are you going to move from these time frames without going to use time cards? And that would have felt like a great failure to have 2022 or come up, or
Yeah.
So
the
what
clock
it meant
ticking
was
backwards.
exactly to do anything like that. Or indeed even over color code it.
That's
between
it. Yeah.
So I really wanted all the worlds of these different timelines to actually be shot in a similar fashion in order for their realities to become one thing when they become crossing each other, rather than just the task of, and now we're in this period, now we're in that time period. So what that meant was that put a huge amount of pressure on the kind of tertiary information in every frame. It had to be communicating to you, and an audience had to be inhaling huge amounts of information without even knowing they were inhaling huge amounts of information, right? Now, the most obvious one would be, and you mentioned it, the haircut. We didn't go so far as to go hair color. It's bright,
Yeah.
But Florence's hair was a very useful but subtle time signifier, right? But everything else in the frame was actually worked out within an inch of his life. And the thing was prepped on a spreadsheet. Every department fed into every story day so that we would know what every day, the extent to which when we first go to her apartment, she hasn't unpacked her boxes. When we go back, it's sort of half painted, but it's not fully painted. And then when he's moved in with her, it's properly decorated, and he's got his LPs, and there's every corner of the room is gently but clearly and very carefully expressing to you a time period, including their costumes. That was all worked out, rather than here's a nice new costume for Florence to wear. It's like, well, when would she rewear that, and when would she and thankfully that was the big thing we didn't know would work. And we did a couple of test screenings when we got to a place ourselves in the edit where we were feeling good about it. And, all the finances were feeling very good about it, but we were like, are we kidding ourselves? Is an audience going to look at it and go, what?
Yeah.
So it's very useful at that point to then just put it up in front of 70 objective eyes, and they will tell you. You can tell from the silence in the room. You don't need any focus group. You just need the experience of that silence in the room to read it and know which bits are working, which bits are boring, which bits are funny. You can't convince yourself that something's funny if no one's laughing.
Nope.
Which bits are sad? Same thing. It concretizes it, and so that was very helpful to reassure us that our instincts were in the right direction with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, I didn't really feel like I needed. I mean, obviously, you've done all the work in the background, so maybe that's why the sort of subconscious details. But I didn't feel like I was desperate to know like what happened at what point, because it was guiding along in a sort of a very nice emotional arc that kind of made sense. And was it very helpful for you as a director to have that spreadsheet from a collaboration point of view? Because usually you're sort of sending off to one HOD and then another HOD, head of department, and it's slightly sort of isolated, and people don't always get the whole different picture of every department in one go. I mean, that must have been quite a nice sort of thing to have.
I mean, I tend to undo a version of that, if I'm honest. I mean, if only in a conversational way of pulling my departments together so that everybody does feel like we are all conversant on the same film, that it's not pulling in different directions. And that's very important. I mean, there's always comes a point when you need, how the environments and the colors of costumes are going to interact. Yeah. And if that's a big shock that nobody's had that you're already too late. The conversations haven't happened. Yeah. So, and of course your DP is straddling everything with you anyway.
Yes, true.
So I always try to encourage it. Just in this case, it became critical. And because of the level of complication, it needed to be sort of written down for everybody to know exactly what we were doing. And then for the set dresses and for costume, for everybody, we would jump between 2 or 3 story days within a day sometimes. And you couldn't afford to fuck up, actually, for somebody to wear the wrong costume at the wrong time or the wrong,
it's vital, isn't it, for plausibility?
It really is. It is. And I learned a lot about this. And I did a TV series for the BBC called Life After Life, which was a 4-part series of a Kate Atkinson novel adaptation, and which a young girl lives 17 different lives, right? And each time she gets a bit further forward into her life before her life ends. And it sounds dark, but it was, again, more playful. But there were subtle shifts in each of the lives. And if you weren't going to go into complete brain meltdown, that's where I left about, okay, we really need to be very clear so that, because no one head can hold all that information, not least of all mine. So yeah, that was sort of helpful. But I think it's also like, it's beyond the sort of technical aspect of the sort of time element. The thing that was on my mind in making it was, I loved Nick Roeg's work, right? And I loved the way Nick Roeg has played with time in his own films. And one of the films that really made me want to make films was a film called Bad Timing, right? An Art Garfunkel and Teresa Russell film. And it was the shuffling order of the scenes and the way in which he sort of time loops back on itself within it, which is extraordinary. And he once said that, in the editing room, all time is available all the time. And I love that phrase. I love that. And that idea that I take it as meaning that a film creates its own relative time universe, right? And that's why I wanted each of the time periods to actually be shot with a similar approach, specific to each scene, obviously, and but that it would feel like one voice, so that when you start shuffling and it starts blending, it doesn't become purely about where you are when. It becomes about one reality, which is the reality of these two people's relationship created for themselves in the world.
So just talking a little bit about the pitching. So, I mean, it's sort of labelled as romantic comedy drama on on Wikipedia. What was the way that you were trying to pitch this? I mean, because it's difficult sometimes with distributors to get them on side when there's like a mixture of genres. Obviously, there's sort of comedy elements and there's a sort of terminal illness drama, as you said. So in those kind of stages, how were you sort of trying to get them over the hurdles of what it is and the multiple time frames, and because it's clearer to you as a filmmaker, I think, than from the other side of things when it has to go out to an audience.
I mean, I was not pitching it as a romantic comedy in any way. In fact,
No.
I was sort of gently disabusing people of that, saying, do not expect Richard Curtis of it, because it's not what's in the material. It's not, and I'm not going to lie and say, yeah, I'm going to make this kind of film. And then they look at it and go, oh my God, it's Bergman. It's like, so no, I was being as honest and authentically clear as I could be, that I felt its great strength was its emotional depth.
Yeah.
Right. And that the humor, which was an important element in it and would be absolutely attended to, was there as a sort of heat shield to allow you to go closer to the heart of darkness, as it were, go closer to the heart of sadness, should we say. And that, by the point that we were speaking with, American distributors who were wanting to come on board, we had Florence Andrew. So that was quite something, right? And and with the sort of emotional depth, I mean, it's stuff that is comfortable for me with work. I've done it. I don't say I've done it before, but I've done similar elements to it before, and I am comfortable in working in an emotional territory which has moments of levity within that. That zone is comfortable for me. So I wasn't, and I think it's very important when you are pitching projects, is that you're not bullshitting. You have to be honest. You can concentrate on the exciting aspects of what you're putting forward, but it's important to not misdescribe. I don't know where the romantic comedy element comes. I mean, people were, before we went to Sundance with Brooklyn, people started saying, "Oh, it's a romantic comedy about a girl going to people just say that. I mean, there are very few labels that make sense in a meaningful way of a film which is a drama, which has emotion and humor in it, because it's a drama with emotion and humor in it. It doesn't quite tell you anything.
That's it. You're right. Yeah, you can't just label it as multifaceted, very genuine drama, because it doesn't ring.
You can, but I don't know that anybody's going to go, that's really what I'm in the mood for. So I get it why people slap the labels on it. I mean, the other label that drives me mad is when people call it a weepy. It's like, and there's something about weepy and rom-com, which when they're both used in a slightly pejorative fashion, as in it's not real filmmaking, it's easy, it's hallmarky, and it's like, no, and I don't accept that. I think it's emotional, and there's a romantic element. Like, I will be honest, the thing, with the great joy of what we shot with Florence and Andrew was how rapturously romantic they are in it, right?
Yeah.
And how believable it is that these two people are falling in love with each other. And that's wonderful because they played it so well.
Yeah.
So by the time we got to the edit, yes, there was a whole swathe of material which actually did play to audiences who love rom-coms and who perhaps have been underserved by interesting romantic films for a while.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I have no problem with that once people will admit that there's a level of emotional complexity in the material as well, and that no respect has been paid for the guardrails of rom-coms. I mean, yeah, there's a meet cute, but it's a very unusual one. And it is 25 minutes into the film, by the way, and you've met her kid by then, or, it's sort of, anyway, yeah, what I'm saying.
So yeah, I know, I very, very much so. I mean, just talking a little bit more about Andrew and Florence and their emotional connection, because I always feel like with a drama that's got to hit emotionally, you've got to have actors that can internalize rather than other kinds of actors, and it's very important that they can hit those beats and be completely authentic, and they can listen to each other, and they can be that sort of window to the emotion, I guess. What was the sort of process of getting them both on board and getting them excited about it?
Andrew, in a way, was easy, right?
Yeah.
Because we'd done a Boy A together 17 years ago, so, and we had kept in touch and talked about other things that hadn't ever happened. But I kind of knew, I knew that this script would be right in his wheelhouse, because he's very comfortable working emotionally. He likes emotional material as an actor. And I knew he had a very direct relationship with grief, with his own grief. He'd been very eloquent about it, talking about his stepmother. And I felt the other aspect that it would play to his strong suit in was the humor. And he's a very funny actor. He's profoundly funny.
Yeah. And
a great physical comedian. And that there was an opportunity here for him to knit all those things together. And indeed, this script hit him in the solar plexus when he read it. It was like, oh my God, somebody's been inside my head. It just really went straight to his heart. So that was, on that level, easy. Okay. Yeah. Florence, when we first made a call, Florence it was about 4 weeks later. So it was still very quick. But the first, time we asked about what was going on in Florence's life, because Andrew then had quite a tight window when we first started talking to him about it. She was doing a Marvel film, which has been doing Marvel and Thunderbolts. So she wasn't available. And, just before we reluctantly, with dragging our heels, were about to move on in that sort of like, oh, I don't want to accept that she's not available kind of way. Casting director, who also happens to be my wife, Fiona Weir, said, let me make one more call to her. Let me just find out what's really going on. And is she really unavailable, or is it just a block unavailability? That's really, She called, and the agent said, oh my God, you won't believe what happened this morning. This has moved back by 8 weeks. And that was comically the window that we needed. And it sat right across Andrew's dates. So, don't get lucky. It was, and it never happens that way, ever. So, but it happened that way then. So that was fun. Now, obviously, I didn't know her. I loved her work, and I've admired. She created so many amazingly sort of vivid and strong women on screen. Incredible performances, and I thought that there would be a great opportunity for her to show her acting chops with the vulnerability of the role.
Yeah, definitely.
And confront the degree of fear that Alma confronts when she has to confront her death.
Yeah, and a lot of complexity as well. There's obviously a soft side, but there's a real strength and holding it all together about her character that's fascinating.
Absolutely, and a kind of a loneliness that, when they get that diagnosis and they're driving away in the car at the start, is they're both lost in their own thoughts. And it's one of the things I loved about it, is that actually it suggests, illness in a very connected, loving relationship like that will make two people walk their own roads separately, even if no matter how close they are together. And that's why it felt like a grown-up drama rather than just the sort of binary romance illness story.
Yeah, and also her sort of a moment taking over the mantle of looking after him in his grief about the situation, which is a sort of shows the reflection of the relationship in a way. I thought that was very some of those scenes were really interesting. So what was the sort of rehearsal process with them, and how you worked with them from a performance standpoint? Obviously, they're very capable in what they do. So yeah, but
they absolutely are. They do not need to be educated or sort of, instructed in anything. That's for sure. But we did rehearse for 2 weeks, and that was very important to me. And they're very different kinds of actors. You know, I mean, Andrew is somebody who is enormously about process and likes a very long process of discussion, and there's huge sort of imaginative deep dives behind moments in the film and scenes. Florence is much more instinctual at the moment. You know, she still comes to it wanting to not put the curse in something, not to over rehearse, which I'm totally respectful of as an approach, and she really wanted to just make sure that. And rehearsal for me for a film is never about over working a piece of territory, and obviously never. And I say territory because I kind of think of it as like being studying a map as opposed to climbing a mountain. Right? You're looking at looking at what the scene is wanting to be, and getting used to the rhythms and discussing what's important in it, without ever opening up the emotion in it.
Yeah.
But a couple of days into rehearsal, I could see there were a few flashpoints in scenes where it was hard to hold them back. They were like a pair of racehorses just wanted to like go. And it was very exciting. But I would be like, hang on, guys, no, come on. No emotion, you know. I don't doubt that they would have been able to get back to it, but it's just interesting that already once they spotted that the task was literally to play with each other, rather than I'll do a beautiful performance, you do a beautiful performance, and hopefully they'll meet in the middle, that actually that sort of silent exchange of energy, I mean in the mystical way, I mean literally in the connection between them, and the way in which they listened to each other, the way in which they would observe each other on set, was very particular. And then the task became about how one organizes the set for that to be maximized, and nothing is in their eye line, nothing is sort of bothering them. They could walk onto that set and the scene would be inevitable,
allowing them to flow, I guess.
To a place.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Do you write on in advance of the? Is it mostly through the rehearsal period? Do you like write up on your scripts? Like, okay, these are different ways we can play the scene. Do you tend to be a little bit more flowing than that, and sort of go on instincts? What's that sort of at the end?
I don't write it up. I don't. I have a very clear emotional trace, and I tend not to write that down. Which I've never done ever since just being. I would put a lot of stuff down on paper to do with shot list, or sometimes even storyboarding, or the more visual expressions of a scene, right? Very happily. But when it comes to the sort of emotional temperature of a scene, I feel it's very clear to me on the inside. And the job of shooting it is to kind of crystallize that, is to pull it out of potentiality into actuality. And that's the fun of it, is that when you begin to see it on set, you will know where it's landing in relation to what your instinct about the scene is, and where you need to adjust it or shift it. But I would have given clues in rehearsals if things were slightly off or heading in a different direction about where I felt it might need to go. But you can't really tell until the day. You know, I mean, for instance, in the big argument scene in the kitchen, what was fascinating was, by then it was late in the shoot, they were so emotionally in tune with each other that the emotion was flying from the first take. There was no warm up. It was just like extraordinary. It was, and everybody on set was like glued to this and wouldn't budge. And I really sort of had one big note for them in that argument, which is, I can't quite hear the argument. You know, it's not really an emotion. Yes, it's emotional, obviously, but it's not really about emotion. It's actually about two different ways of approaching the illness here. And that's important. And this is where it's all coming out into the open, which is, you think this and he thinks this. And you cannot let go of what is your own relationship to your truthful place in the world, and what has carried you forward in life with your gifts for cooking. And as far as he's concerned, anything that extends your life on this planet is a good thing and is only to be embraced.
Yeah.
And that kind of clash, the thoughts needed to be just raised up a little bit underneath the material. So that's what I mean, is that it's not about writing an end point. You have to sort of watch very carefully and respond to what's going on with the actors in the moment.
Yeah, and that's a lovely sentiment to sort of finish on. Thank you so much, John. It's been a really great chat and a fantastic movie, and I wish you all the success with it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you, Tom. All the best.
Cheers.
There we have it. Thank you so much for listening. You're all superstars. If you have enjoyed this, then do go listen to our back catalogue. We've had some incredible guests recently. I mean, the list is endless, I would say, including last week's Eileen Tizell talking about her wonderful feature debut as well. She's an actress, and now she's directed Falling Into Place, which is out in cinemas right now. And also, the following week we had Jai Courtney, brilliant actor and director as well, Sean Byrne, talking about Dangerous Animals, the shark movie. It's not really a shark movie, but it's amazing. It's out now. Other guests recently have included the producing Hollywood legend Ken Cow, talking about working with Ryan Gosling and working some amazing indie films, and also how to sell and distribute your film with the Exchange's sales agent is Hakamangan. And then before that we had Rosie Fellner and Ross Clark on indie filmmaking, financing, sales, cinema distribution, as well as Mitchell Tolliday, Lauren Cornelius and Neil Rickatzen talking about making their wonderful comedy drama Murder Ballads. And just before that we had Gareth Evans talking about Gangs of London, The Raid and Havoc, his latest film. So that's just a few of the guests we've had on recently. We've got even more coming up for you, including Steven Spielberg's daughter making her debut movie. I think that might be next week. How exciting. I think we've got F1 as well coming up, the Brad Pitt movie. We've got the director of that, as well as the Shakespeare Sisters and some other amazing guests. Cool. Thanks Dom Lenoir, if you see him on his socials, if nothing else, for interviewing the amazing John Crowley there. If you've liked that, tell your friends, and also subscribe if you haven't already. It's pretty simple. It's free. We don't ask much of you. Do that, because then you get it straight in your inbox, straight away into your podcast device of choice. It popped up straight away if you subscribe. If not, you've got to search for it. And it helps us, and it helps us grow. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for being amazing. Thank you for going out there and being an indie filmmaker or loving film that you listen to this. And if you do want to make your film, then do something about it. Right? Make it happen. Be inspired by this episode and go out there now. Email someone right this second. Literally, send them a text. Send them a tweet, an Instagram. Make things happen. Be proactive and get shit done. And if you are lucky enough to rise up and do well, it is your duty to send the elevator back down. We will see you next Tuesday. Well, some of you will, and I might. I don't know what's going on. I'm a little tired, but all is good. But if I don't see you next Tuesday, I'll see you the Tuesday after. I've been Giles Alderson, and you've been listening to the Filmmakers Podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.